Hi everybody, I'm here in Spartanburg County. I'm at the site of a small but interesting battle which took place here during the Revolutionary War in what is now Glendale, South Carolina. It's called the Battle of Wofford Iron Works. It was fought completely between militia, which did not make it any less bloody and deadly for those who were involved. And since it was fought by Americans against Americans, I'm going to refer to the pro-independent side as Whigs and the pro-loyalist side as Tories, since that is how they would have called themselves and that's how they would have called each other. So yeah, hope you enjoy as I talk to you about the Battle of Wofford Iron Works. Alright, so I apologize for any background noise. I'm right here next to the river, so you might hear that a little bit. But back behind me where you can kind of see the bridge, that's more or less where the ironworks was. That's where a lot of the fighting took place. It's not actually where the battle began. This was a running skirmish, so it took place in a few different locations. Before I get to that though, just let me give you a little background. The British had captured Charleston. It was 1780 and the British had captured Charleston. So they controlled the coast, but they didn't yet control the backcountry. They sent a force of provincial regulars, so these were American loyalists that were trained and uniformed like British soldiers, under the command of Major Patriot Ferguson, who was a valiant officer and really just a very interesting character as well. They dispatched him and his men into the backcountry to raise more men, to raise militia among the South Carolinians. So soon they'd accumulated a force of about 1,800 men, which was a lot, considering it was pretty sparsely settled. So Ferguson was hanging out here with his almost 2,000 men in the Carolina Backcountry, representing the King's cause. Meanwhile, a force of about 1,000 militia on the Whig side, from both North Carolina and Georgia, were shadowing them and just kind of watching them. They knew they weren't really strong enough to fight them yet, but they were kind of shadowing them and watching them. So when Ferguson's men began to march into what is now Spartanburg County, the Whig militia that were under the joint command of Colonels Elijah Clarke and Isaac Shelby, they left behind a force of about 600 men at their base, which I've never been able to figure out where that was. And they took about 400 men to guard the approach to the ironworks. The reason that these ironworks was important was because it was used, all of these ironworks were used to produce lots of very valuable tools and weapons, including sabers. We'll see a little bit later that the sabers are definitely used in this battle. But yeah, and just as an aside, the ironworks was owned by a very courageous Whig officer whose last name was Wofford. I can't remember his first name, and whose son would later go on to found Wofford College, which is in present-day Spartanburg. So anyway, yeah, let's go take a look at where the battle began. All right, so I'm here at the more or less the location where the 400 mounted Whig militiamen had made their camp. If you look now, it is the location of the Starbucks, which is kind of funny. However, it makes sense. Um, Now there's a Starbucks here. In 1807, there was actually a tavern that was built here. The reason that there was a tavern built here is probably because it was and is a crossroads. So it was a logical place for the Whigs to make their camp because they wanted to guard the road approaching the ironworks. So, like I said, there were 400 mounted militia here. That is a lot of men, and these men needed to eat. Like all soldiers, they marched and fought on their stomachs. So there was actually a wagon train about 3 miles away from here, which is headed towards them with food. So Ferguson, being the cunning fellow that he was, um, found out about this wagon train, even though he didn't know where the Whigs were camped. And he sent a force of 130 Tory militiamen and 14 red-coated provincial dragoons, Loyalist dragoons, under the command of a Captain Dunlap to capture this wagon train. So Dunlap and his men went to capture the Whig baggage train. However, on the way to do that, they actually ran into 3 Whig scouts. One of them got away, but they managed to capture 2 of them. And the scouts that they captured let them know that the Whigs were encamped right here where I'm standing. So Dunlap saw the opportunity and decided to attack them, surprise them in their camp. But when they arrived and rode into the camp, it looks like the Whigs were ready for them because they actually had laid an ambush for them. They fired a volley, and a whole lot of horsemen fell out of their saddles. According to a Loyalist officer who was present for the engagement, there were about 20 Loyalists killed and wounded. So at this point, the Loyalists fell back and seemed to be in retreat. However, Captain Dunlap, brave fellow that he was, put himself at the head of his dragoons and charged back into the Whig encampment. And when he did this, the Tory mounted militia followed his example, and now there ensued a terrible hand-to-hand fight. Both sides were using sabers at this point, and it would have been absolutely brutal. Eventually, the Whigs had to fall back, and they fell back all the way to the ironworks, which was what they really wanted to defend. And the Whigs pursued them all the way there. All right, so as I said, the Tories dislodged the Whigs from their encampment, and the Whigs fell back about 5 miles, a little less, about 4 miles actually, to the ironworks, which was their strategic objective that they wanted to defend. And the Tories pursued them. All the while, both sides, since they were mounted militia, they were firing at each other while they retreated and pursued, and both sides were sustaining casualties. You wonder why the Tories pursued, since the Whigs there were 400 of them, and the Tories only had, at this point, probably about 120. But you have to keep in mind that the Whigs had taken a number of Tory prisoners, and so these guys were fighting to try and save their comrades. They chased them 5 miles, all the way back to the ironworks. Like I said, all the way sustaining casualties. And once they got to the ironworks, they continued to fight for a while. However, the Whigs quickly fortified themselves in the buildings surrounding the ironworks. And after a while, it was clear that it was going to cost too many men killed for the Tories to dislodge them from there. So at this point, the Tories actually have to give up and retreat. So it looks like a Whig victory, but that is actually not the end of the story. After Dunlap's Tory horsemen retreat, the Whigs are happy for a few hours, and then it becomes clear that the larger army of about 1,600 men under Ferguson is approaching. These are mostly infantry now. They hunker down and decide to resist him, at least for a little while, and they inflict some casualties on him. However, the Whigs are no fools. They understand that 400 men can't win against 1,600. And so after a little while, they retreat. However, that is not the end of the story either. Ferguson knows that the Whigs have taken Tory prisoners. So the Whigs cross the river here, the creek. This is really a creek. And began to retreat, thinking that the Tories are just going to kind of let them go. And Ferguson chases them because he wants to get those prisoners back. And he also just kind of wants to punish the Whigs. He's a little bit mean, but he was good at what he did for sure. So he chases them for a while, and he chases them another few miles all the way to the Patriot River. The Whig horsemen are withdrawing. Some of them are withdrawing. Others are giving covering fire so that their comrades can withdraw. There are a number of Tory riflemen who are taking pot shots and killing the Whig militia as they withdraw. So there's still sustaining casualties on both sides. And so Ferguson pursues them all the way to the Patriot River. And that's where we're going to go right now. Behind me is a river, the Patriot River. This is going to be a little bit harder to get across than just a creek. Remember, you've got infantrymen. They're going to be crossing on foot while these mounted militia are firing at them. And so at this point, Ferguson gave up his pursuit and the Whigs got away. But the Tories had pursued them almost 4 miles from what is now Glendale to here in what is now Clifton. And I think it says a whole lot about the Whigs that they were on horseback. The Tories are on foot at this point, pursuing them. The Whigs could have easily gotten away, but it's almost like they just wanted to kill as many of the other side as they could. And I really think that's kind of true about both sides. This was a civil war, and there's no kind of anger or hate than anger or hate that comes from a civil war. And both sides were out for blood. The Tories pursued them longer than they had to, and the Whigs hung around and shot at the Tories longer than they had to. Anyway, which side won? Technically, I think you'd have to call it a Tory victory, at least a strategic victory, because they did take the ironworks, which was their objective. However, the Whigs inflicted more casualties on the Tories than the Tories inflicted on them, and the Tories could ill afford to lose those men. So make of that what you will. I think there's not really a clear victor, but it's a very interesting little battle. About 35 Whigs killed and wounded, and about 50 Tories killed and wounded. And it was a running battle that went on for about 7 miles. Started in East Spartanburg, what's now East Spartanburg, continued through Glendale to what's now Clifton. So yeah, definitely a hard day's fight for both sides. Eventually, the ironworks had to be given up by the Loyalists and fell back into Whig hands. However, I think it bears mentioning that about a year after the skirmish took place, the infamous Loyalist partisan Bloody Bill Cunningham would raid and destroy the ironworks in 1781. At that point, Wofford, who, like I said, was a Whig, would move down to what's now Woodruff and become one of the founding settlers of Woodruff, South Carolina. And as I mentioned, his son would go on to found Wofford College in present-day Spartanburg County. So that's all for my video today. I hope you enjoyed. I love doing these little skirmishes here because they're so neglected and also so interesting. But if you enjoyed the video, then do me a favor, give me a like or subscribe so that you can subscribe to the channel so that you can know when new videos come out. And also check out my t-shirt website, expedition-tees.com. It's t-shirts for adventurers and explorers. If you like hiking, camping, stuff like that, definitely give that a look and let me know what you think about the video below in the comments. So thanks for watching, and as always, take care.